So for some, the temptation isn't to look for meaning in work and in isolation, so much as it is about looking for it in popularity and influence. It's about being the leader, the one that everyone follows. And we've got whole industries today that are built up around how to be a successful leader, whatever that means. But Solomon's point as we come to the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 4 is that if we're looking to find our meaning and our purpose in being a popular leader, actually that's a really dangerous place to land. And that's the case from both sides of the equation. For some, there's this huge temptation to be the popular leader, the one who everyone follows, who takes triumph after triumph in their stride, who's acclaimed by everyone. But then there's also the danger of wanting a popular leader to follow, right? And that's probably a temptation that we face quite acutely at the moment, certainly in the UK. I'd imagine that most of us aren't overly impressed with the leadership that we've experienced in either the nation or in the church in recent months. And the insidious idea might hatch in our minds that if only we had a great leader or just even a decent leader, then life would be so much better. Well, whichever way we're looking at this from, Solomon wants to tell us from personal experience that we shouldn't put too much hope in those who aspire to lead us. The popular leader can all too easily and all too quickly become the unpopular leader. In fact, they can easily become the disastrous leader. And tragically, we've seen that all too often in the life of the church as well. Now, you see, there are actually two issues here in this last little section in Ecclesiastes 4. The first is that actually popular acclaim, is a fickle thing. And the hands that applaud you today might just stab you in the back tomorrow. Again, it all seems very apposite, doesn't it? We see all around us the attitude that says, well, I will follow the leaders so long as what the leaders say fits with what I want to do. And actually, when it doesn't, then I'm very happy to disregard what the leaders are calling us to. And people will follow whoever they think will give them what they think they want. But as soon as they think that you don't serve their interests, then as a leader, you will be replaced. Yeah, so this is what Solomon's pointing out, that if you're looking for meaning in being the popular leader, the one that everyone follows, well, to use his phrase, you're chasing the wind. You can spend your whole life preparing for leadership and then find that the people choose someone else, maybe someone who you look at and think they are totally unqualified. They're a complete fool. They have no experience. In fact, one of the examples Solomon gives here is even a criminal. People would even follow a criminal if they promise to give them what they actually want. Now, it might be, of course, that the leader that people want isn't actually the leader that people need. And from Solomon's point of view, it was only a couple of generations ago, of course, that the people wanted Saul as their king. But it's an often recognized truth that actually the best leaders are the ones who are most reluctant to take on the mantle of leadership. I mean, think about people like Moses, who's called by God. And that's interesting, isn't it? He's called by God. He's not appointed to leadership by popular vote. He's called by God, and he is compelled to take up a role that he did not want. I mean, actually, when you think about Moses, early on, it seems like he did want that. He was willing for it. He almost desired it and felt that he was qualified and prepared for it. And that went disastrously wrong. And it's only when he's given up the hope of leadership, it's only when he's in Midian hiding and is called by God, and suddenly we see this very reluctant leader who becomes one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen. But there is another problem, of course, all right, which is that, and we've looked at this already in Ecclesiastes, that power corrupts us. In verse 13, Solomon is that old but foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. Remember, Ecclesiastes is a very autobiographical book. It's the act of repentance of an aged Solomon looking back over his life and repenting of the mistakes that he now sees he's made. And one of them is he allowed his arrogance to deafen him, his popularity to deafen him to the advice of his counselors. He believed his own press, and pride meant that he became someone who was unwilling to listen to those whom he deemed to be inferior, less qualified than him. And tragically, disaster follows for Solomon and for the kingdom. You see, if you find your purpose, your meaning in being the leader, then what happens when people reject you? What happens when they refuse to follow you? When in fact they choose to follow someone else? And Solomon's point is eventually they will. And the cycle doesn't end. You know, today's celebrity king is tomorrow's old news. The distinguished politician of today is the disgraced and cynical hack of tomorrow. Those who make the headline news will be forgotten sooner than anybody would ever dare to think possible. And there's a real tragedy in those who spend so many years pursuing influence and status, walking the corridors of power, waiting for their time to come, and when it does, grasping it and refusing to let go of it, even as it slips through their fingers, as it must eventually do. The tragedy of a life spent trying to find meaning in something that is so fleeting, so unstable. That, says Solomon, is a chasing after the wind. It does raise the question, of course, doesn't it? Is there anyone out there who can lead us? Is there anyone we can trust? Is there anyone who can bring us to a point of fulfillment and purpose? Is there a king that we can follow who is better than Solomon? You see, his point is you can't make life work under the sun. We need a heavenly king, one called into leadership, one who will establish and uphold his kingdom with justice and righteousness. Can you imagine that? Imagine a humble king who listened to the counsel of his father and followed it, who died a criminal's death, sacrificed for his people, born in poverty, but raised in glory. And yet even he is not followed. They weren't even pleased with him.